The office was silent. So silent you could hear the ticking clock echo through the glass walls. Then a voice thundered, "Maria, that's it. You're fired." Everyone froze. The CEO, Daniel Graves, known for his discipline and zero-tolerance rules, stood behind his desk, glaring. Maria, a tired-looking woman in her late 30s, clutched her apron. Her hands trembled. "Sir, please, just one more chance. I was only 15 minutes late." Daniel's voice was cold as steel. 15 minutes? Again? You've been late 3 times this month. I run a company, not a charity." Her lips quivered, but she said nothing more. The guards escorted her out as she wiped away silent tears. The other employees whispered, "Why was she always late? Why didn't she defend herself?" No one knew the truth. No one saw the way she left every morning before sunrise, not for herself, but for someone else. Friends, you won't believe what Daniel would discover just a week later, something that would turn his pride into pain and his anger into tears. Because sometimes the person we judge the hardest carries the kindest heart of all. Daniel Graves was a man who believed time was money. He woke up at 5 every morning, worked out, had breakfast made by a private chef, and arrived at the office before the sun rose. In his world, there were no excuses, only results. But just a few miles away, Maria woke up at the same hour to a very different life. Her small apartment barely had light. The stove clicked twice before the flame appeared. She moved quickly, boiling rice, frying eggs, wrapping food into old containers. Her 2 children, still half asleep, watched as she rushed around. "Mom, are you going to eat?" her little boy asked. She smiled weakly. "After I feed the others, sweetheart." "The others?" he asked, but she only kissed his forehead and whispered, "Be good at school." Then she carried those containers and ran. Not to a cafe, not to a relative's home, but somewhere far away. Meanwhile, Daniel's morning was filled with spreadsheets and strategy calls. He liked efficiency, discipline, and people who never made mistakes. So when Maria arrived late again and again, he didn't see the exhaustion in her eyes. He only saw inefficiency. He didn't know that every morning, before stepping into his glass tower, she walked through the forgotten parts of the city, where people had no homes, no food, and no hope. 2 worlds, one built on success, the other on sacrifice. And soon they were about to collide. It was Friday morning when Daniel called Maria into his office. His voice was sharp but measured. "Maria, I like your work. You're honest. But your tardiness is becoming a problem." She nodded silently. "Yes, sir." "This is your final warning," he said firmly. "Be on time Monday. No exceptions." She nodded again, hiding the tremor in her voice. That weekend it rained heavily. Maria spent it cooking meals, sewing clothes, and comforting her sick daughter. Yet come Monday morning, she was up before dawn, determined to be early. But when she stepped outside, she saw them, the same 3 old men huddled under the bridge, coughing, shivering. Her heart sank. She couldn't just walk past. So she unpacked her containers, handed out warm food, and covered them with blankets. By the time she reached the office, her clothes were damp and the clock read 9:15. Daniel didn't wait for explanations. "You're late again," he said coldly. "I'm sorry, sir. It won't—" "You're done. Pack your things." Her eyes glistened, but she only whispered, "I understand." And with that, she walked out, not just carrying her purse, but the weight of a secret she couldn't share. Days passed, but Daniel couldn't shake her image from his mind. Something about her silence haunted him. At night, while staring at the city lights, he wondered Why didn't she fight back? Why did she accept it so quietly? The following week, Daniel's company sponsored a charity food drive in the poor district. He rarely attended such events himself, but something urged him to go. The streets were muddy, children barefoot, people lining up for food. And then he froze. There she was, Maria, the same woman he fired, kneeling beside an old veteran, spoon-feeding him soup. Her eyes were filled with compassion, her clothes simple but neat. Daniel stepped closer, hiding behind a parked van. He watched as she handed out meals, one by one, smiling despite her exhaustion. A young volunteer whispered to another, "That's Maria. She does this every morning before work, or, well, before she lost her job." Daniel's chest tightened. "Every morning?" he muttered under his breath. The volunteer nodded. "Yeah, she cooks at home and feeds the veterans here. Her husband was one of them, you know. She says it's her promise to him." For the first time, Daniel felt shame heavy enough to crush his pride. The woman he'd fired for being late wasn't lazy. She was a hero, one he'd condemned without even asking why. When the crowd cleared, Daniel finally approached her. "Maria," he said softly. She turned, startled, the man who'd fired her, standing there in a crisp white shirt among the hungry and poor. "Sir, what are you doing here?" she asked. "I should be the one asking that," he replied gently. "You feed them every morning?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir. I started after my husband died." He frowned. "Your husband?" She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "He was a soldier, served for 15 years. He saved the lives of several men in his unit, but he didn't come back home. Before he left for his last mission, he made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd never stop feeding those who had no one else." She glanced at the men around her, all veterans, scarred by time and war. "He was his brother's," she continued. "So every morning, I cook and bring them food. It's not charity, sir. It's my promise to love them like he would have." Daniel stood silent, his throat tightening. "All those days you were late?" he whispered. She nodded. "I tried to make it on time, but sometimes the bus was late, or one of them fell ill. I didn't want to use excuses. I didn't want pity. I just needed that job to keep this going." Daniel's heart shattered. He had fired a woman for compassion, punished kindness because it didn't fit his schedule. For the first time, the CEO who prided himself on control felt completely powerless. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. "It's my promise to love them like he would have." The next morning, he arrived at the office early, not out of habit, but reflection. By noon, he drove back to Maria's neighborhood and found her packing food again. "Maria," he said softly, "I came to apologize." She looked up surprised. "I was right," he continued. "I didn't see you, I only saw rules." He handed her an envelope. "Your job is yours again, and more than that, I want to help you continue this work." She hesitated. "Sir, I don't want charity." He smiled. "It's not charity, it's respect." Weeks later, the company launched a new initiative, Meals of Honor, a program inspired by Maria's story, feeding veterans across the city. Employees volunteered, the CEO cooked beside them, and Maria led the effort, not as an employee, but as the program's director. The woman once shamed for being late became the heart of a movement that changed countless lives. Friends, life has a way of humbling us when we least expect it. Daniel learned that leadership isn't about power, it's about understanding. And Maria taught the world that kindness doesn't clock in or clock out. It simply gives, quietly, endlessly. Before you judge someone, ask yourself, do you know their story? Do you know who they're feeding, who they're saving, or what pain they're carrying? Sometimes the people who seem careless are the ones who care the most. So next time someone is late, broken, or struggling, choose grace. You never know what kind of love hides behind their silence. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion is the truest form of strength. And tell us in the comments, would you have done what Maria did or what Daniel did? Because sometimes one act of understanding can change an entire world.